The email notification chimed on my phone at exactly 7:32 a.m., and I knew immediately something was wrong. After 15 years in corporate marketing, you develop an instinct for trouble, and this particular Tuesday morning in downtown Chicago felt different. The autumn wind was already cutting through the glass towers of the financial district, and storm clouds were gathering over Lake Michigan, matching the tension that had been building in our office for weeks. I had been Marcus Henderson's right-hand marketing director at Henderson Global Solutions for over a decade, helping build the company from a modest consulting firm into a multi-million-dollar enterprise. Marcus trusted me with his most important clients, his biggest campaigns, and his company's reputation. But recently, everything had changed since his son Bradley returned from his MBA program at Wharton, armed with fresh theories and an ego the size of Navy Pier. Make sure to subscribe to our channel to help us bring you more real stories like this one, and comment below to let us know where you're watching from around the world. Your support helps us continue sharing these authentic experiences that so many of us face in our professional lives. That morning's email was addressed to the entire marketing department, sent by Bradley Henderson with his father copied. The subject line read, "Organizational restructuring and performance expectations." My coffee went cold as I read the contents, each word hitting like a physical blow. Bradley had outlined his new vision for the department, describing several longtime employees as legacy hires who may be replaceable in our evolving corporate landscape. My name appeared prominently in that category, along with Sarah from graphic design and Tom from market research, both of whom had been with the company almost as long as I had. The most devastating part wasn't just being labeled replaceable, it was seeing how casually Bradley had dismissed years of dedication and success. He wrote about bringing in fresh talent with contemporary skill sets and eliminating redundancies in our current workforce structure. The clinical language couldn't mask what this really was: a targeted attack on the people who had built this company while he was still figuring out his college major. I sat in my downtown apartment, looking out at the Chicago River through my window, trying to process what I had just read. The gray morning matched my mood perfectly, with heavy clouds promising the kind of storm that could shut down the elevated trains. I had given Henderson Global Solutions the best years of my career, working 60-hour weeks, traveling across the country to secure major contracts, and mentoring younger employees who looked up to me as a role model. My phone buzzed with a text from Sarah, who lived in Lincoln Park and had apparently seen the email at the same time. "Can you believe this?" she wrote, followed by several angry emojis. Within minutes, my phone was lighting up with messages from other colleagues, all expressing shock and outrage at Bradley's public humiliation of veteran staff members. Tom called me directly, his voice shaking with anger as he talked about updating his resume and looking for new opportunities. But I wasn't ready to surrender without a fight. I had too much history with this company and too much respect for Marcus to let his son's arrogance destroy everything we had built together. I decided to schedule a meeting with Marcus himself, hoping that he might not have fully understood the implications of his son's email or the damage it could cause to company morale and productivity. The Henderson Global Solutions offices occupied 3 floors of a gleaming tower in the Loop, with views of Millennium Park and the lakefront that reminded everyone of how successful the company had become. I had helped design the marketing campaigns that funded those luxurious offices, and walking through the familiar hallways felt like touring a museum of my own professional achievements. The walls displayed framed advertisements and campaign materials from projects I had led, each one representing months of hard work and creative collaboration. Marcus agreed to see me that afternoon, and I spent the morning preparing my case. I gathered performance reviews, client testimonials, and revenue reports that demonstrated my value to the organization. I also compiled feedback from team members and external partners who had specifically requested to work with me on future projects. The evidence was overwhelming. I wasn't just a valuable employee. I was an integral part of the company's success story. When I knocked on Marcus's corner office door at 2 p.m., he looked genuinely troubled. Marcus Henderson was in his early 60s, with silver hair and the kind of weathered face that suggested decades of difficult business decisions. He had built his company through relationship building and personal integrity, values that seemed increasingly foreign to his son's approach to management. The office smelled of the expensive coffee he imported from a small roaster in River North, and classical music played softly from hidden speakers. "Please sit down," Marcus said, gesturing to the leather chairs arranged around a coffee table that had hosted countless important business discussions. "I want you to know that I've been getting calls all morning about Bradley's email. I'm concerned about how this was handled, and I want to hear your perspective on the situation." I chose my words carefully, knowing that I was talking about his son, but also knowing that the future of my career might depend on this conversation. I explained how the email had affected not just me but the entire department, describing the fear and uncertainty that was already impacting productivity. I showed him the evidence of my contributions and asked him directly whether he truly believed I was replaceable in the organization he had worked so hard to build. Marcus listened without interrupting, occasionally nodding or making notes on a legal pad. When I finished speaking, he was quiet for several minutes, staring out the window at the bustling streets below. Finally, he turned back to me with an expression that seemed to carry the weight of difficult family dynamics and business pressures that I could only imagine. "Bradley is eager to make his mark on this company," Marcus said slowly, "and sometimes that enthusiasm leads to decisions that don't fully consider the human impact. I built Henderson Global Solutions by valuing people like you, employees who understand that business success comes from relationships and trust, not just quarterly reports and efficiency metrics." He assured me that my position was secure and that he would speak with Bradley about the tone and content of future communications. But as I walked back to my office, I couldn't shake the feeling that this conversation was just the beginning of a larger conflict between father and son, with longtime employees caught in the middle. Over the following weeks, the workplace atmosphere became increasingly tense. Bradley seemed to interpret his father's intervention as a temporary setback rather than a real course correction, and he began finding subtler ways to undermine the employees he had targeted in his email. He questioned our methods in meetings, requested excessive documentation for routine tasks, and consistently excluded us from strategic planning sessions that would have previously included our input. The breaking point came during a presentation to our biggest client, Northwestern Mutual, who had specifically requested my involvement based on our successful campaign history. Bradley insisted on leading the presentation himself, relegating me to a supporting role despite my years of experience with this particular account. The meeting was scheduled for a Thursday afternoon in November, with early snow already coating the downtown streets and creating the kind of treacherous driving conditions that make Chicago winters legendary. I had prepared extensively for the presentation, developing detailed market analysis and creative concepts that built on our previous successful campaigns. But Bradley dismissed most of my contributions during our internal prep meetings, preferring to focus on cost-cutting measures and efficiency improvements that missed the point of what Northwestern Mutual valued in our partnership. The actual presentation was a disaster. Bradley's approach came across as impersonal and disconnected from the client's needs, while his obvious inexperience with their industry became apparent within the first 10 minutes. The Northwestern Mutual executives, who had worked with me for over 5 years, kept directing their questions to me rather than to Bradley, creating an awkward dynamic that highlighted the mismatch between his authority and his expertise. After the meeting, which ended without the contract renewal we had expected, I walked through Grant Park trying to process what had just happened. The bare trees and frozen pathways reflected my mood perfectly, and I found myself questioning whether I could continue working in an environment where politics mattered more than performance. The snow was falling harder now, and the few pedestrians hurried past with their heads down, everyone focused on reaching their destinations as quickly as possible. That evening, I received a phone call that would change everything. Rebecca Chen, the head of marketing at Meridian Consulting Group, Henderson Global's biggest competitor, had heard about the turmoil at our company through industry networks. Rebecca and I had maintained a professional relationship over the years, often running into each other at marketing conferences and industry events throughout the Midwest. "I know this might seem sudden," Rebecca said during our phone conversation, "but we've been looking for someone with your experience and client relationships to lead our new corporate accounts division. The position would come with a significant salary increase, equity participation, and the kind of creative freedom that I think you've been missing lately." Meridian Consulting Group had been trying to compete with Henderson Global Solutions for years, but they lacked the established client relationships and industry reputation that Marcus had spent decades building. Rebecca explained that they were ready to make a major investment in talent acquisition, specifically targeting experienced professionals who could bring both expertise and existing business relationships to their organization. The offer was tempting, but it also felt like a betrayal of everything I had built with Marcus. I asked for time to consider the opportunity, knowing that this decision would have implications far beyond my own career. If I joined Meridian, I would essentially be helping them compete directly against the company where I had spent the most productive years of my professional life. I spent the weekend walking through my Lincoln Park neighborhood, trying to weigh the competing factors in this decision. The Saturday morning farmers market was winding down for the season, but a few hardy vendors were still selling winter vegetables and homemade preserves to customers bundled up against the November cold. The familiar rhythms of my neighborhood routine helped me think more clearly about what I really wanted from my career. On one hand, staying at Henderson Global Solutions meant continuing to work in an environment where my contributions were increasingly undervalued, and where a young executive with no real experience could potentially derail my career trajectory. Bradley had made it clear that he saw me as expendable, and I had no reason to believe his attitude would change significantly over time. On the other hand, leaving for a competitor felt like abandoning Marcus during a difficult period in his company's development. I genuinely respected him as a business leader and as a person, and I understood that he was trying to balance his love for his son with his responsibility to the organization he had built. The ethical implications of taking client relationships to a competing firm also weighed heavily on my conscience. By Monday morning, I had reached a decision, but I wanted to give Marcus one final opportunity to address the situation before I took any irreversible steps. I requested another meeting with him, this time being more direct about my concerns and my options. The Chicago weather had turned bitter cold, with wind gusts off the lake that made walking downtown feel like an endurance test, but the harsh conditions seemed appropriate for the difficult conversation I was about to have. Marcus's office felt different during our second meeting, with an underlying tension that hadn't been present during our earlier discussion. He seemed to understand that this conversation would be more consequential than our previous one, and he listened with the focused attention of someone who realized that the stakes had been raised significantly. "I need to be completely honest with you," I told him, sitting forward in my chair and maintaining direct eye contact. "The situation with Bradley isn't improving, and it's affecting my ability to do my job effectively. I've received an offer from another firm, and I'm seriously considering accepting it unless we can find a way to resolve these issues." I didn't mention Meridian Consulting Group by name, but I could see in Marcus's expression that he understood the implications of losing a senior executive to a competitor. He asked specific questions about my concerns with Bradley's management style and requested concrete examples of how the situation was impacting my work and the department's overall performance. The conversation lasted for over an hour, with Marcus taking detailed notes and occasionally asking clarifying questions about specific incidents or policies. He seemed genuinely committed to finding a solution, but he also appeared to be struggling with the family dynamics that complicated any potential resolution. At one point, he mentioned that Bradley felt pressure to prove himself quickly and might be overcompensating by trying to implement changes too rapidly. "I understand that family businesses face unique challenges," I responded carefully, "but those challenges shouldn't come at the expense of the employees who have helped build this company's success. I need to work in an environment where my experience is valued and where I can focus on serving our clients rather than navigating internal politics." Marcus promised to have another conversation with Bradley and to implement clearer boundaries around decision-making authority and communication protocols. He also offered me a modest salary increase and additional vacation time as a gesture of good faith. But as we shook hands and I left his office, I sensed that these measures might be too little, too late to address the fundamental problems in the organization's culture. The following Tuesday, everything came to a head during what should have been a routine department meeting. Bradley had called the meeting to discuss performance optimization strategies, but it quickly became apparent that this was another opportunity for him to criticize established procedures and suggest replacements for longtime employees. The conference room windows looked out over a gray December morning, with ice forming on the edges of the glass and creating distorted views of the city beyond. When Bradley began reviewing individual performance metrics, he focused disproportionately on the employees he had mentioned in his infamous email, questioning our methods and suggesting that newer hires might be better suited to handle certain responsibilities. His tone was condescending, and his suggestions ignored the institutional knowledge and client relationships that gave us value beyond what any performance metric could capture. I found myself thinking about Rebecca Chen's offer and the creative freedom she had promised at Meridian Consulting Group. While Bradley droned on about efficiency improvements and cost reduction strategies, I imagined working in an environment where experience was valued and where strategic thinking mattered more than office politics. The contrast became increasingly stark as the meeting progressed. After the meeting ended, I walked back to my office and opened my laptop to compose an email that would change the trajectory of my career. I wrote a professional but direct message to Rebecca, accepting her offer and requesting a start date in early January. The decision felt both liberating and terrifying, but I knew that staying in my current situation would only lead to further frustration and professional stagnation. I also drafted my resignation letter to Marcus, trying to strike a balance between honesty about my reasons for leaving and respect for our long-standing professional relationship. I explained that I had accepted a position elsewhere and would be happy to help transition my responsibilities to ensure minimal disruption to our clients and projects. I scheduled the email to send the following morning, giving myself one final night to reconsider this major decision. That evening, I walked through Millennium Park despite the freezing temperatures, needing the clarity that comes from movement and fresh air. The Christmas decorations were already up throughout downtown Chicago, creating a festive atmosphere that contrasted sharply with my conflicted emotions about leaving a company that had been such an important part of my professional identity. I thought about the campaigns I had developed, the clients I had cultivated, and the younger employees I had mentored during my years at Henderson Global Solutions. There was Jennifer, a recent Northwestern graduate who had joined our team 2 years ago as a junior account coordinator. I had spent countless hours teaching her about client relationship management, helping her develop presentation skills, and guiding her through her first major campaign launch. She had grown into one of our most promising young professionals, and I knew my departure would leave her without the mentorship she still needed to reach her full potential. Then there was the Morrison Industries account, a manufacturing client I had won over after months of relationship building and strategic presentations. They had specifically requested to work with me on their upcoming product launch, trusting my understanding of their industry and target market. Leaving would mean abandoning that project at a critical stage, potentially damaging both the client relationship and the campaign's success. I also considered the financial implications of my decision. While Rebecca's offer included a significant salary increase, changing jobs always involves some degree of financial uncertainty and adjustment. I would be giving up accumulated vacation time, the pension contributions Henderson Global had made on my behalf, and the comfort of knowing exactly how the company's bonus structure worked. Starting fresh at Meridian meant proving myself all over again, regardless of my previous track record. The emotional weight of leaving was perhaps the most difficult aspect to process. Henderson Global Solutions hadn't just been my employer for over a decade, it had been where I had grown from a junior marketing coordinator into a senior executive. The building itself held memories of late-night campaign planning sessions, celebration dinners after major account wins, and the gradual evolution of professional relationships into genuine friendships. Walking away from all of that felt like closing a significant chapter of my life. The next morning arrived gray and cold, with the kind of bitter wind that makes Chicago winters feel endless. I arrived at the office early, before most of my colleagues, and sent both emails before I could second-guess myself any further. The resignation letter went to Marcus, while my acceptance email went to Rebecca Chun at Meridian Consulting Group. Within 30 minutes, my phone was ringing. Marcus wanted to see me immediately, and I could hear the surprise and disappointment in his voice even through our brief phone conversation. I gathered my personal items from my desk, knowing that this meeting might be my last official act as an employee of Henderson Global Solutions. Marcus's office felt different this time, charged with the emotional weight of a relationship that was ending after more than a decade of successful collaboration. He had printed out my resignation letter and had it spread on his desk alongside what appeared to be financial reports and organizational charts. His usually composed demeanor showed cracks of genuine distress. "I had hoped we could work through these issues," he said, looking older than I had ever seen him. "Losing you isn't just about losing an employee, it's about losing a piece of this company's history and culture. You've been part of almost every major success we've had over the past 10 years. I assured him that my decision wasn't made lightly and that I had enormous respect for him both personally and professionally. I explained that the situation with Bradley had created an environment where I couldn't effectively serve our clients or contribute to the company's growth, and that continuing under those circumstances wouldn't benefit anyone involved. "Where are you going?" Marcus asked directly, and I could see that he already suspected the answer based on his expression. "Meridian Consulting Group," I replied honestly, knowing that there was no point in being evasive about information he would discover soon enough anyway. The silence that followed stretched for what felt like several minutes but was probably only 30 seconds. Marcus stared out the window at the Chicago skyline, perhaps thinking about the competitive implications of my departure and the client relationships that might follow me to his biggest rival. "I understand why you're making this choice," he said finally, "and I can't say I blame you for taking a better opportunity, but I hope you understand how difficult this makes things for those of us who remain behind." I offered to help with the transition in any way that would be appropriate, and I emphasized that I would maintain the highest ethical standards regarding confidential information and client relationships. Marcus accepted my offer and suggested that we schedule transition meetings with key accounts to ensure continuity of service. The remaining 2 weeks at Henderson Global Solutions passed quickly, filled with client meetings, documentation projects, and farewell conversations with colleagues who had become genuine friends over the years. Sarah and Tom, the other employees targeted in Bradley's email, both confided that they were also updating their resumes and exploring new opportunities. The toxic environment that Bradley had created was driving away institutional knowledge and experienced talent at an alarming rate. Bradley himself was notably absent during most of my final weeks, perhaps avoiding the awkward conversations that would naturally arise from our professional disagreement. When we did interact, he maintained a polite but distant demeanor, never acknowledging his role in my decision to leave or expressing any regret about losing a senior team member. My last day arrived with a typical Chicago winter storm, dumping several inches of snow on the downtown area and creating the kind of transportation chaos that locals accept as part of seasonal life. The symbolism wasn't lost on me as I packed up the last of my personal items and prepared to walk out of the building that had been my professional home for so many years. Marcus stopped by my office for a final conversation, bringing coffee from the expensive roaster he favored and sitting down for what felt like a genuine goodbye between friends rather than a formal business interaction. We talked about shared memories, successful campaigns, and the evolution of the marketing industry over the decade we had worked together. "I want you to know that this isn't how I wanted things to end," Marcus said as our conversation wound down. "You've been one of the best employees this company has ever had, and I'm sorry that family complications created a situation where you felt you had to leave." I thanked him for his leadership and mentorship over the years, emphasizing how much I had learned from watching him build a successful business while maintaining his personal integrity. Despite the difficult circumstances surrounding my departure, I genuinely respected Marcus Henderson and hoped that he would find a way to resolve the management issues that were affecting his company's culture. The transition to Meridian Consulting Group exceeded my expectations in almost every way. Rebecca Chun had been accurate about the creative freedom and collaborative atmosphere that characterized their approach to client service. My new colleagues welcomed me warmly, and several mentioned that they had been following my work at Henderson Global Solutions with professional interest for years. The office environment felt refreshingly different from the tense atmosphere I had left behind. Located in a renovated warehouse in River North, Meridian's workspace emphasized open collaboration and creative thinking rather than traditional corporate hierarchy. The exposed brick walls and industrial fixtures created an atmosphere that encouraged innovative approaches to marketing challenges. Within my first month at Meridian, I was leading strategy sessions for 3 major accounts and developing campaign concepts that utilized both traditional and digital marketing channels. The company's willingness to invest in cutting-edge technology and data analytics tools gave me access to resources that I had never had at Henderson Global Solutions, despite their larger size and established client base. More importantly, I was working with a leadership team that valued experience and encouraged input from employees at all levels of the organization. Rebecca Chun scheduled regular one-on-one meetings to discuss professional development and strategic planning, creating the kind of mentoring relationship that I had missed during my final months at Henderson Global Solutions. The competitive implications of my move became apparent within the first quarter of my employment at Meridian. Several former Henderson Global clients reached out to explore working with my new company, citing their confidence in my abilities and their interest in Meridian's innovative approach to marketing strategy. While I was careful to maintain ethical boundaries and avoid actively soliciting Henderson Global accounts, the natural evolution of professional relationships inevitably benefited my new employer. By spring, the contrast between my old and new work environments had become even more pronounced. Chicago was emerging from its brutal winter, with longer days and warmer temperatures that matched my improved professional outlook. I was working on challenging projects with talented colleagues, earning a higher salary, and enjoying the kind of job satisfaction that had been missing from my life for months. I occasionally heard updates about Henderson Global Solutions through industry contacts and former colleagues who had remained with the company. The reports weren't encouraging. Bradley's management approach had continued to create turnover among experienced employees, and several major clients had ended their relationships with the firm after receiving poor service from inexperienced replacement staff members. Sarah from graphic design eventually joined a boutique creative agency, while Tom from market research took a position with a nonprofit organization focused on social justice initiatives. Both reported being much happier in their new roles, away from the political pressures and professional uncertainties that had characterized their final months at Henderson Global Solutions. Marcus Henderson reached out to me once during the spring, asking if I would be interested in returning to his company under different management arrangements. The conversation was friendly but brief. I thanked him for the offer but explained that I was committed to my new role and excited about the opportunities ahead at Meridian Consulting Group. I learned later, through industry publications, that Henderson Global Solutions had struggled significantly during the months following my departure. The company's revenue had declined by nearly 15%, and they had lost several major accounts to competitors, including Meridian. Marcus had been forced to bring in external consultants to address organizational problems and rebuild client relationships that had been damaged by poor service and inconsistent communication. The most satisfying aspect of my new position wasn't the competitive success against my former employer, but rather the opportunity to work in an environment where professionalism and competence were valued above office politics and family connections. I was able to focus entirely on serving clients and developing innovative marketing strategies, without having to navigate the interpersonal conflicts that had made my job so stressful during those final months at Henderson Global Solutions. My first major project at Meridian involved developing a comprehensive digital marketing strategy for a regional bank that was expanding into online services. The challenge required integrating traditional banking relationships with modern digital customer acquisition techniques, exactly the kind of complex problem-solving that I found most engaging. Working with Meridian's data analytics team, I was able to develop customer segmentation models that were far more sophisticated than anything I had access to at Henderson Global Solutions. The project's success led to additional opportunities with other financial services clients, and within 6 months I was managing a portfolio of accounts that generated more revenue for Meridian than I had ever handled at my previous position. The combination of better resources, more collaborative colleagues, and leadership that trusted my expertise created a professional environment where I could perform at my highest level. I also discovered that Meridian's approach to professional development was much more comprehensive than what I had experienced previously. The company sponsored attendance at industry conferences, provided access to online training programs, and encouraged employees to pursue additional certifications that would benefit both their personal growth and the company's service offerings. Rebecca Chun made it clear that she saw investment in employee development as essential to maintaining competitive advantages in a rapidly evolving industry. The contrast with Henderson Global Solutions became even more apparent when I learned that Bradley had eliminated the company's professional development budget as part of his cost-cutting initiatives. Former colleagues told me that training requests were being denied, conference attendance was limited to essential personnel only, and several employees had been forced to pay for industry certifications out of their own pockets. The short-sighted approach was already affecting the company's ability to stay current with industry trends and best practices. During my second quarter at Meridian, I received an unexpected call from Jennifer, my former mentee at Henderson Global Solutions. She was struggling with the Morrison Industries account that I had been forced to abandon, and Bradley was pressuring her to deliver results without providing the support or guidance she needed to succeed. The client was becoming frustrated with inconsistent communication and strategic direction, and Jennifer was afraid she might lose the account entirely. While I couldn't directly interfere with Henderson Global's client relationships, I was able to provide Jennifer with some general advice about manufacturing industry marketing and suggest resources that might help her better understand Morrison's business challenges. Our conversation reinforced my decision to leave Henderson Global, but it also reminded me of the human cost of organizational dysfunction and poor leadership. Looking back on that difficult period, I realized that Bradley Henderson's email calling me replaceable was actually a catalyst that forced me to evaluate my professional worth and career trajectory more honestly than I might have otherwise. His dismissive attitude and unprofessional behavior revealed fundamental problems in Henderson Global Solutions culture that would have continued to affect my job satisfaction and career development, regardless of any specific incident. The experience taught me valuable lessons about workplace dynamics, professional relationships, and the importance of working for organizations that align with your values and treat employees with respect. Sometimes the most difficult professional challenges create opportunities for growth and improvement that wouldn't have emerged under more comfortable circumstances. One of the most important realizations was understanding the difference between being valued as a person and being valued as an employee. Marcus Henderson had always treated me with respect and appreciation, but the organizational culture he allowed to develop under his son's influence ultimately made it impossible for me to continue contributing effectively. Good intentions from leadership aren't sufficient if they don't translate into concrete policies and practices that protect employees from toxic behavior. I also learned to recognize the warning signs of organizational dysfunction much earlier in the process. The email incident with Bradley wasn't an isolated event, it was the culmination of months of subtle undermining, exclusion from decision-making, and gradual erosion of professional autonomy. In future positions, I would be much more proactive about addressing these issues before they reached crisis levels. The networking relationships I had built over years of industry involvement proved to be invaluable during the transition period. Rebecca Chen's offer came through professional connections that I had maintained even when they didn't seem immediately relevant to my current job. The lesson was clear: investing time in industry relationships and maintaining visibility in professional communities creates opportunities that might not otherwise exist. My success at Meridian Consulting Group has validated my decision to leave Henderson Global Solutions, demonstrating that experience and expertise remain valuable in competitive markets despite what younger managers might believe about replacing veteran employees with less expensive alternatives. The clients who followed me to Meridian confirmed that professional relationships and institutional knowledge can't be easily replicated or replaced by enthusiasm alone. The situation at Henderson Global Solutions continued to deteriorate throughout my first year at Meridian. Industry publications reported that the company had lost nearly 30% of its major accounts, and several key employees from other departments had also left for competitor firms. Marcus Henderson was forced to bring in expensive management consultants to address organizational problems and develop strategies for rebuilding client relationships that had been damaged by inconsistent service. The most telling indicator of the company's struggles was when Bradley Henderson's LinkedIn profile quietly changed to show him pursuing new opportunities in business development. Industry gossip suggested that Marcus had finally recognized the need to remove his son from operational responsibilities, though the damage to company culture and client relationships had already been extensive. Sarah, my former colleague from graphic design, called me 6 months after I joined Meridian to share an interesting piece of news. Henderson Global Solutions had reached out to her at her new agency, asking if she would be interested in returning as a freelance consultant to help with client projects. The irony wasn't lost on either of us. They were now trying to hire back, at premium consultant rates, the same employees they had labeled as replaceable and pushed out of the organization. The corporate world continues to evolve rapidly, with new technologies and changing consumer behaviors requiring constant adaptation and learning. But the fundamental principles of business success, relationship building, ethical behavior, and quality service remain as important as ever. Companies that understand this balance between innovation and experience will continue to thrive, while those that prioritize short-term cost savings over long-term relationship building may find themselves struggling to maintain competitive advantages. Working at Meridian has also exposed me to different approaches to leadership development and succession planning. Rebecca Chen has been transparent about her own career path and the mistakes she made early in her management experience. She actively seeks feedback from her team and acknowledges when strategic decisions don't produce expected results. The contrast with Bradley's defensive, blame-shifting approach to leadership couldn't be more pronounced. The company has also implemented mentorship programs that pair experienced professionals with newer employees, ensuring knowledge transfer and professional development happens systematically rather than randomly. I've been matched with 2 junior staff members, helping them develop client management skills and strategic thinking abilities that will benefit both their careers and the company's long-term success. As I continue building my career at Meridian Consulting Group, I'm grateful for both the positive and negative experiences that brought me to this point. The professional challenges I faced at Henderson Global Solutions ultimately led to better opportunities and a more satisfying work environment, proving that sometimes being called replaceable can be the push you need to discover your true professional value.